Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Qumulus Solutions Cybersecurity webinar series. My name is Kyle Johnson. I'm the Director of Security Operations and Risk Management for Qumulus. And I also have Brian Manns, who is our Senior Information Security Engineer, who will be talking to more of the technical details later on in the presentation. Today's presentation is going to be talking about the 2020 Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. We're just going to highlight some of the findings from that report and what organizations can really do from this report and the insights that they gave about what they can do to their organization and really put in the controls they need to secure their organization as a whole. First things first, if this is your first time watching one of these webinars, we are Qumulus Solutions. We're based out of South Bend, right there by Notre Dame's campus. We're a cybersecurity professional services firm that really has a whole slew of different services that we offer, controls and risk assessments, policy development, some virtual CISO roles. Brian heads up our vulnerability management side, and then I head up some of the employee awareness training managed services that we offer. But we really provide the tools and the people that organizations need to really secure their organization, and that's what Qumulus does from a consulting standpoint. So without further ado, let's hop into the data breach report. So what is this report? So Verizon does a yearly report that details a lot of the cybersecurity incidents and confirmed breaches from the prior year. And we're going to get into the difference between an incident and a breach here soon. But this is talking about a wide variety of industries, many different incidents, and then, like I said, the confirmed breaches. So this is the actual 13th year of this report. And within this report, they've analyzed over 150,000 incidents. 32,000 of those incidents met Verizon's quality standards to put into this report and really analyze. And then out of those incidents then came the 3,950 confirmed data breaches. May not sound like a lot compared to the incidents, but here's what classifies an incident versus a breach. So an incident is simply a security event that compromises the integrity, confidentiality, or availability of an information asset. So this could be, hey, we got a phishing email come through, didn't click on it, but maybe needs to be investigated because 200 other people in your organization received that same email. Now, let's flip it to a breach side. This is an incident that results in the confirmed disclosure, not just the potential exposure of data to an unauthorized party. So this means that data has left the door or the bad guys have gotten your data somehow, some way, and it can be confirmed. That is what they're talking about when they reference a breach. So big differences here. So let's keep that in mind as we start talking about some of the different findings that Verizon had that we're going to analyze. So a summary of the findings, really a lot of it has to do with hacking. I know that's hacker is a fun word that the media likes to use and everybody likes to use, but it's still very prominent out there. One thing that stands out and that we're going to talk about more in depth coming out is the errors. So this could be misconfigurations. This could be different things in your web applications that the bad guys are taking advantage of. We like to talk about malware and ransomware and all of these different things, and that's obviously very prominent as well. But another stat from who's behind the breaches is very interesting, as it's still showing, external actors are really going after organizations and really the main cause for some of these breaches. We do hear a lot about internal actors and insider threats as well that can be a great danger to organizations, but it still is looking like the external actors are really the ones kind of going after the organizations. Now, the organized criminal groups, those are going to be very financially focused, or your specific espionage groups or something like that. So that's very prominent out there as well, as we all hear ransomware in the news, quite often, and more than what we would like to at that point. So next, let's look at the motive. So I just mentioned financially based with those criminal groups, and obviously from the report we can see that financial based attacks lead by far, really. Espionage doesn't even really hold a candle to it right now with as much money that the bad guys can actually get from. As you can see in the slide here, examples would be ransomware, your business email compromise. So business email compromise is going to be, somebody taking over an account inside of an organization that is trying to trick somebody into sending some sort of wire transfer money, something like that. Those are great schemes that the bad guys take advantage of, and they're really getting more sophisticated, and they're successful still to this day. Another example would be extortion. So there's the sextortion, if you will, where they say, hey, we're watching you through your webcam. We have all of this data on you. You don't want it to get out. Those types of things, pay us $500 and we'll leave you alone. That still is very successful. You may not be guilty, but if somebody says you're guilty, and then it starts to make you, maybe second guess yourself, and people fall for that. So it's really, really key to stay aware about, any email coming through or any suspicious activity on your systems. So with that, some of the different actions that those bad guys take with those motives. It looks like phishing is still one of the top ways that organizations are being breached. That's no surprise, because humans can either be your weakest link, as we like to say, or your strongest asset. They're going to be your first line of defense when it comes to email security, protecting the money at your organization potentially. So those are types of things that we really need to look out for. So what can your organization do? Build a robust security awareness program. Really have the phishing tests that go out on a quarter basis or on a monthly basis, something like that. Really get your users aware of what's going on in the world with phishing, whether it be super sophisticated attacks or something as generic as, hey, you have a random package coming, click this link to track it. And they may or may not have a package coming, but a lot of people still click those links. We see the use of stolen credentials. We're going to touch on those a little bit later, but this is still a big problem. But like I mentioned before, the misconfiguration. So this could be your web application, something like that with inside of your organization that is maybe out to date. And I talk about exploiting vulnerabilities right here. Patch, and Brian's going to hit on those a little bit later. But those are some things that organizations can do to really minimize the attack surface and kind of mitigate some of those vulnerabilities in your network, because it's still a very big thing that really come back to get organizations in a breach. Privilege abuse. Part of doing risk assessments and different controls assessments is reviewing that access that people have in the organization. So if somebody doesn't need admin credentials or admin privilege on a machine, remove that, so that again eliminates some of or mitigates some of the vulnerabilities that an attacker can take advantage of. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Brian, who is going to kind of dive into some of the technical details of this report.
Thanks, Kyle. As you can see, passwords are still a problem. When I read this report, my jaw dropped, because this is brute force or use of stolen credentials. If you have stolen credentials, you probably were a part of a breach. And the fact that they're still able to use them, you probably didn't report that breach. But over 80% of hacking was use of brute force. Now, there's something that should be also in there, is dictionary tags, because brute force is more of just going at it till you get it. And I can tell you a 12-character password utilizing a high-performance machine can be cracked in less than 10 minutes. So the longer the password, the better. and don't reuse your passwords. So if I'm going over here to Netflix and I have the same email address and I use the same password as I'm going to do on my Hulu account, that's when you're going to start seeing issues. Not that Netflix or Hulu are that big of an issue, but if they can get in there and see your credit card information, they may be able to attain that. Now, exploit vulnerabilities, a little bit lower. I thought that would have been a little bit higher, but it would appear changing passwords is key to that. Exploit vulnerabilities, that would be like WannaCry. You got Eternal Blue, those patches that may have not been patched in the regular patch management system. And that's what a good vulnerability management helps you out do, is trying to find those exploitable vulnerabilities, such as an MS17-010, which is Eternal Blue, okay? And they can get remote code execution. That's the worst words you want to hear when you get a vulnerability assessment, is remote code execution. When you hear those words, that means I don't have to have any user interaction. I see it. I can logically touch it. I'm getting into it. Use of backdoor or C2. That's just your command and control. They've already gotten access to your system, but maybe, hey, I'm not going to change the data. I'm going to just sell the access. Abusive functionality, whatever functionality is allowed. I'll give you a perfect example of abusive functionality. If you allow people to upload pictures to your website, they can exploit that functionality. So they can put in a PHP file, put in a few comments that tells your website, even though it's saying, hey, this needs to be a picture, and then they can turn around and get reverse shell on that. SQLi injection, that's you don't see a whole lot of going on there, so that's a good thing. But that's just keeping things, once again, if you go to the exploit vulnerabilities, most of those can be done by having a vulnerability management program. Now, two-factor. Now, what can help you with? Let's say you don't want to try to memorize 20 different passwords for 20 different websites. Two-factor can help you out with that, but it's not best practice. You still want to change those passwords. That way, if they get access to one, they're not going to get access to them all, okay? So next up is misconfigurations. Misconfigurations. I would lie if I say I haven't misconfigured something in my life, specifically with a firewall. You let something come in. Misconfiguration would also be, hey, I'm going to put this in. It works. That's awesome. And you didn't change the default password. You didn't harden the system. You didn't bring the permissions level or the ports to only what you needed. Over 50% of those are done by security researchers in terms of they discover those vulnerabilities, not just within something you may have configured from your network, but from a Microsoft bug or a Adobe Java, Java and Adobe, those are weekly. So those security researchers are probably pretty busy. Customer external, they may find something on your website reported by employees. So an employee can also come in there and take and say, hey, something here looks wrong. And they may see something like, let's say, wireless access controller or something on a website. Say, hey, I found this on our website. What's this doing out here? Well, they got access now to your internal network. Misdelivery. Misdelivery is nothing more than a great example, and I've done this myself when I was doing IT work. And you got a cache of emails, and you went to set Tim his information for login, and you may have sent Tom instead because it was the first name that came up in that. Maybe not to that extent of you don't put passwords in the email, but some personal information. Okay. Publishing errors. I have seen this firsthand. It manually mapped the drive, and it was a situation where it was manually mapped instead of versus automatically utilizing group policy. And they mapped the drive to a web server that published board contents about where this particular organization was going, and changes throughout the organization. So that's not necessarily something you want published or on the web server, internal or external, but I've seen that, and that's basically what they're going through for there. Top malware varieties. Password dumper. Now I can get in depth on this. I mean, there's all kinds, but password dumper, you know, we're going to get your passwords, because you know what? Those are pretty important, because guess what? Once I get one password, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to try all these different accounts across the board, and I probably will be successful. More likely, and from previous studies in terms of the stolen passwords, if I get a password, let's say to your Netflix, is it the same as your work password? Is it the same as your VPN password? More than likely, you're trying to stick to the same format or the same password throughout, so that you don't have to continually like, oh, I'm locked out, I don't change my password. Capture app data. This is something that they will sit there and they will just get the information, and as it comes in, and then they will exfiltrate it, and then they turn around and sell it on the black market. Ransomware. I've seen this up close and personal. Particularly it was SamSam that I saw, and it's a nasty one, and it encrypts, and it wasn't the only thing that saved us from the word breach was it didn't exfiltrate the data. Okay. Capturing downloaders. Those are more, you're driving by a website, you know, you download it, and we're going to put some malicious piece of software on your machine, either to gather information or gather credentials, check your network out. Trojans are more along the lines of, I want control. I am remote controlling that. Some people will call them rats, remote access Trojans. Capture store data that's there. And then obviously you're going to try to export that data once you get it up to a site, and then download it and get it onto the black market and sell it. Next is discovery of breaches. Days or less. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, and the average used to be 196 days. Okay. Now it appears to be getting less. And is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Now, I can tell you there are many variables in the days or less. Maybe if you look at the amount of vulnerabilities that are coming out, we have probably about 114, 13, I think just this past month, where 3 of them were exploitable. So it may take a vendor such as, and I don't mean to throw Microsoft under the bus, but it may take them a little bit longer to get that patch, and maybe that vulnerability has been out there, but they haven't been able to release a patch for the 2 or 3 months. Normal time for an exploit to be developed is 0 to 45 days. So you got 45 days to get that patch in there, unless it already is exploitable. And that's kind of what you're seeing. And I can also tell you, if you got ransomware, you know you've been breached. So I mean, it's not going to take that long. The other factor could be organizations could be adopting SIEM, Security Information Event Management, so that they can see what the story of their network, and reducing the mean time to recover, because they reduce the mean time to detect. Okay. Industry analysis. Now, this is where I'm getting into the definition of a breach, and I struggle with that definition, and I struggle probably with these numbers, because I'm sitting here looking at it, I'm like, oh, that doesn't seem so bad. Only 3,950 organizations were breached last year. That's not bad. Well, let's hang on a second. If we go back, a few slides, we talked about stolen passwords are 80%. So think about that. You didn't report that breach. They're still out there using your passwords, and you never were able to confirm. Now, why would that happen? Why were you unable to confirm that breach happened? Well, you probably didn't have SIEM in place to be able to monitor your network and tell all the things that you do. You may not have your antivirus firing off emails or watching your IPS. So those confirmations, should these numbers be higher? I'm going to say yes. A lot of them should be. Just in last year, of those that were in the media, I'm thinking, there should be a lot higher. But organizations, there's that embarrassment of having to report a breach, to put it in the newspaper, say, yeah, we suffered. This is, we're going through it. We'll dive deeper into a few of the areas of breaches, and we'll start off with educational services. Now, I have a lot of experience in educational area, and one of the things that educational areas struggle with is keeping an up-to-date network, vulnerability management, that security training, because when you try to go talk to the user, some of, specifically me as well, I struggle to convert the geek speak over to say, hey, don't do this. Why? Because I told you not to do it. And finding that middle ground to help in terms of a good security awareness training program. Ransomware, headed up. Now, I did not experience ransomwares, but I did experience quite a few denial of services. Obviously, there's quite a few websites out there that will allow you to do a denial of services. This is where you get with your ISP and say, hey, we need some ingress filtering here so that we can drop packets, because usually what they do is they spoof an internal IP address and they try to get in that route with that, and then you see the firing of the denial of service. Well, if you're saying you're over here, but you're coming from over there, no, drop that, okay? Some of the things that, educational services had issues with, capture app data, capture stored data, because there's student information in there, right? Social Security, grades, those are the types of things that they could be going after. I mean, to understand that, especially from a K-12 side, none of these students will have any credit at that point. So this may be being able to be used to use their credit to open up fake credit cards and whatnot. Establish a good vulnerability management program. Once again, this is a struggle for this area. Unless you're in a college setting, vulnerability management is going to be a struggle. The services are not there. Maybe the resources, the technical resources, so to speak. But you have to scan it. If you don't know what's on your network and you've got all these vendors coming in, there's a good opportunity that they may be bringing the ransomware on, or the back doors, and that's allowing you to get these ransomware downloaders and command and control Trojans that have been parked on your system somewhere. Many different vendors, many different, as you know, you'll have this group over here come in here. You may have this server over here for your student information system, all third-party vendors. So you got to stay on top of that so you understand what's on your network, so you can reduce these numbers, hopefully, in the future. So we'll move on to financial and insurance. And obviously these guys, and I want you to notice something. Look at the crimeware is nothing more than, and I'm looking at the bottom, jumping all the way to the bottom of the PowerPoint, and crimeware is nothing more than just malware and whatnot. Notice how low they are, because they have the things in place. They're regulated. They have to do vulnerability assessments of their network. They're required. Whereas most of the time they're getting in is through web applications, front ends. So they get that information to their systems. They can explore it. Miscellaneous errors, that could be just a bad configuration or abuse of functionality right there, okay? Privilege misuse. Now, I'd hate to think that somebody has been given extra permissions and come to find out that, hey, I give myself a 10-cent raise, every week, be like an office space. Lost and stolen assets. That's when you get into some of the CIS controls of how to protect your lost and stolen assets. But obviously, lost and stolen assets, you want to be able to wipe it remotely. So you need a good MDM, and you need to encrypt the drives. That way, if they get it, they can't. It's going to be going to take a while for them to be able to get into it. Some of the things that are helping is to be able to do a secure configuration of applications. So, you get back into the CIS, they tell you how to harden these things, or if you need a bigger assessment, those can be provided, such as a NIST. And then perform an annual cyber risk assessment to identify the gaps. Now, I will tell you from the vulnerability side, I get to come in underneath those risk assessments, but some of the benefits that I've heard from organizations is, the disconnect between IT and administration. Well, a risk assessment really pulls everybody together to understand what's going on from a cyber risk standpoint, and that everybody needs to be involved. On to healthcare. Healthcare, another area where I have a little bit of experience. Been there, done that. 798 incidents, 521 breaches. Now, if you work in a hospital, one of the biggest areas that you need help with is your radiology department. Why? Because a lot of that equipment there is attached to $500,000, $1 million pieces of equipment that if I have to update that XP machine, I have to also buy a new MRI machine or mammogram machine. So and that's where you get into, well, I'm going to have to probably isolate that. So you get into that part of it and try to disconnect a little bit parts of the network and only allow things to communicate that needs to be communicated. Data classification. Now, what that means is, where is your PHI? Is it just on your HIS system or your EHR system? More than likely, it may be out there in a few network drives. Excel files may have some information in it. Do you know where they're at? Do you know if it's encrypted in the transfer and storage? Security awareness is a must-do for this industry. Now, something I said while at healthcare is, if you are not phishing your users, someone else will do it for you. And that is the truth. And if you don't teach them that this is a bad link, this is why, and show them the ins and outs of how to spot a phishing email, they won't know what to do when it comes that time when somebody sends them that Excel file or Word file or link that may be in there that will eventually lead you to a breach. Vulnerability management. I will tell you, I started doing this in healthcare, and I would sit there and hammer, particularly an area which was the pharmacy, and went after, it was WannaCry, and kept telling them, no, you didn't patch your machines. Well, they're all decentralized. So think about that. There's no centralized manner for them to manage their machines. I had to tell them which machines, what the name of it was, and then they were able to get in and take care of their machines. So that's something very important. Now, I'll hand it back over to Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So like Brian just said, really understanding what is on your network and being able to identify those assets and even your software is something very, very important. And it's one of the top 2 controls that the Center for Internet Security has released. So establishing an information security framework is simply having a repeatable process and a document that you can update and go back to and review on a whether that's an annual basis, every couple of years, depending on how quickly you can get some of these controls put into place. But a framework is something that is very important to an organization. So it allows, like Brian said, there's a disconnect sometimes between the organization and IT. This allows your IT or security departments to be able to show executive management or board members, if you're at an institution, what controls are being put into place, how you're doing from a scoring standpoint, and what you need to work on in the future. So the CIS Top 20 is a great framework for organizations that really may not know where to begin or have very few things put into place. This is going to be a prioritized 1 through 20 list that you can work your way down through. And we all understand what's going on right now in the world. It's very strange times, and everybody has been kind of thrown away from their norm. But hackers aren't going to go away just because of a pandemic. So try to do whatever you can to keep your organization as secure as it can be as people start going remote or working from different locations and all of these different things. Try to keep security top of mind, and this is something that you can really work through and really have a more secure organization. So you can look, your basic organization can have, your basic controls would be your 1 through 6. So things like controlling your administrative privileges, like we talked about before. I mean, those are massive things that organizations can really take advantage of. And then you can move down the list from there and really start implementing some of those bigger controls and more sophisticated controls that can really help secure the organization. Now, for some organizations that may be a little more mature, you can go into the NIST cybersecurity framework. You can go up into the risk. Brian talked about risk assessments. You can go into the risk framework that looks at in NIST 800-171. And then for your government agencies and those types of organizations that are the big boys of the world, you're looking at the 853 and all of those controls. So the CSF is looking at about, the CSF and 171 are looking at about 110 different controls/risk statements. And then you can also look at the ISO 27000 series as well. Tailor that framework to your organization. You may be able to pick and choose certain things from different frameworks, and really it's all about making sure that whatever you choose fits your organization, fits the executive buy-in. Obviously, budget constraints, we see it across the board right now. We're not trying to sell anything to you, but really trying to make you aware of what's going on in the world as from a security standpoint, so you can better secure your organization or know how to secure your organization as we move forward, not just in pandemics or remote working and all of these different incidents, but really just on a baseline standard framework that you can have in a more secure organization. So that's all we have. I hope you got a lot out of this. It's a very long document, so we tried to find a lot of the different key findings that were in the Verizon data breach report and really bring that in. But if you're bored during this quarantine and you would like to read what I think it was about 150 pages, feel free to do so, or you can trust us here and go off of our PowerPoint that we picked out the key findings. But if anybody needs anything from a security standpoint, this is how you can contact Qumulus. It's info@qumulussolutions.com. You can visit our website to learn more about our services. Feel free to reach out to Brian and I. You can find us on LinkedIn or our website. We'll be happy to help out and discuss some things of how we can help. But really take a look at those security frameworks, and hope everyone stays well and stays safe. And until next time, thank you.